let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman. We are here. It is spring, end of April. The pollen is blooming. Lots of activity going on. It is what in the tech industry we would call peak travel season. I'm just back a couple of weeks ago. We had KubeCon London. We had a great preview last month. Hopefully you had a chance to check that out. And we were going to do a debrief on KubeCon as well as some of the interesting news with our guest this week. But quick note before we get to it, two things. Number one, of course, we are just a few weeks away from Red Hat Summit. So hopefully you are checking that out. It is May 19th through 22nd, Community Day to kick things off. I've got a panel I'll be on for cloud services and a lot of activity there. But if you haven't already, if you just go to red.ht/summit, you can find all the information on that. Second thing, just on the side, I am 3 months away from my 7th time doing the Pan Mass Challenge. So it is the largest cycling charity fundraiser, and it raises money for cancer research. So if you're familiar with Dana-Farber, really the preeminent in cancer research in the world. Last year, the Red Hat team, which I lead, 4 of us raised $31,000. I'm a little bit behind on my training. I'm a little bit behind on my fundraising. So we're going to put in the chat, if you have some money and can help donate, it is a charitable donation. So tax deductible where applicable. Any funds on that are greatly appreciated. And of course, any matching from corporate helps a ton. Yeah, reach out if you'd like to do a bike ride sometime if you're in the Boston area too. So with that out of the way, want to bring on our guest. He should be no stranger to many of you. Langdon White, happened to cross paths with him at London, but he sits not far from us here in Boston. He's a former Red Hatter, and he is currently clinical assistant professor in the Faculty of Computer and Data Science and technical director at Boston University. Langdon, welcome to In the Clouds. You were host of a couple of shows from Red Hat in your time here, and great to see you.
Scars. Yeah, I kind of miss doing them. We did the Level Up Hour for a long time, talking about why containers are interesting and how to get involved in them. And one of the things that I really liked to produce was kind of conference swag that was available to anyone, and wasn't kind of gender specific and also a little unusual. And we started doing these soccer scarves, and so we did the Level Up Hour scarf, but then we also did my later show, which was the Insider show on Cube by Example, which is still available. Both of them are actually still available if you want to watch the old ones. And so we did a scarf for that too, and then I have a few others, of course. But I think the soccer scarves are a lot of fun, as everyone probably knows. Yeah, and some of us actually live in Boston, unlike Stu, who's just kind of nearby.
Hey, Langdon, this week was the Boston Marathon. My usual joke, I live 26.2 miles west of the city. And
okay.
Week would actually recognize, oh, wait, you live in Hopkinton. I'm like, yes, I do. Last year, I actually biked the marathon route the night before, which was a lot of fun. I did a bike ride on Sunday. I didn't do the marathon route. But yeah, it's...
there's a lot of hills.
Yeah, I do enough biking that the marathon route on the bike was pretty easy, to be honest. 26 miles. I remember, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, would you go bike 26 miles? I'm like, are you kidding? Sunday was my first outdoor bike ride, and I did 22 miles, and it was yeah, no, that's easy. I'll go
nice.
Do 30, 40, 50 miles because I've got to be ready for my 2-day, 162 miles in 3 months. So
that's a whole lot of miles. Yeah.
Yeah, and we go all the way out to the Cape on that, and then we take the I'll actually be taking a boat back to Boston in the seaport. But I was in our Boston office this week one day. But you and I crossed paths and set this up while we were in London. So always love that, you got to go, more than 1,000 miles away, some other country, to talk to somebody that, lives a few miles away from where we both work. Love to hear your experience as KubeCon, about 13,000 of the cloud native enthusiasts there. How'd the show go for you?
Actually really well. It's crazy. I still don't feel like it feels like it's 12,000 people, or 13,000 people or whatever the official number was, which is always kind of crazy, I kind of think. The part that really blew my mind is, I don't know if you noticed, but once the conference was rolling, there was actually 2 other conferences in the same venue. And I was like, how big is this building? So it's a lot of walking. I think I was averaging, 20K plus steps a day, both kind of walking around London, but then also, at the conference. But it's so great to be able to the hallway track is really good, and just for anyone who doesn't do a lot of the conference circuit, that opportunity to kind of go around and see the people who you don't get to see. I talk about Deb Nicholson in this a lot, because she lives literally 2 miles from me, maybe 3, and I only ever see her far away from Boston at conferences, which I think is kind of hilarious. But you get to see all these people, you get to talk about, tech stuff. One of the reasons I originally moved to Boston is that you would overhear a conversation about technology on the street, rather than where I used to live in Albany, and that never really happened. So the thing I really like to talk about and do and stuff like that is really cool when, you and 12,000 or 13,000 of your closest friends are all there to talk about the same kind of stuff. And then also just kind of seeing where that innovation is happening. Sure, it's open source, right? But having an idea of what's really going on is just so difficult, because it's just, just the, CNCF in and of itself, just that part of the open source world is just so explosive. So many things are going on. Keeping track of it all is just really difficult. And one of the great ways to do that is kind of seeing, what talks are being selected, what talks are being given, what's the attendance to those individual talks. Of course, AI is the containers of 10 years ago. But, beyond that, you can kind of see, what are people going to, what are they gravitating towards, right? And then kind of also kind of walking around the booths and seeing, what are the big companies like Red Hat or whatever, what are they talking about? What aspects of the open source world are they talking about? And a lot of that is, I think, really invaluable. That is a huge part of the conference for me. And I found, as always, right, I found that really interesting. It's also interesting to see the comparison between what's kind of hot in Europe versus what's hot in the US. And so, if you go to KubeCon North America, you're going to have a different set of things that are being all that in a bag of chips versus the ones in Europe. And I think also that dichotomy is also often really interesting.
Yeah. So many good things there. Absolutely, Langdon, for myself, the hallway track's always good. London Excel Center, it is massive. I think it's a bit of a misnomer to call it London, because every dinner I had was a 45-minute to an hour ride
Right.
On the underground to actually go to a dinner in London, as opposed to, we're in the Docklands. And unfortunately,
Right.
you and I weren't flying into the London City airport, which some of the Europeans did, which was right nearby, because it was an hour and a half, from Heathrow. It's an hour from Gatwick. But yeah, it was a phenomenal event. As you said, what is hot, what is mature, what are all the vendors in there? And with all the AI stuff, one of the more interesting conversations we've been having on the industry is just like, hey, what's going to happen to careers? For how many decades it was like, learn computer programming and all this stuff. I've been telling people, it's like, well, understand data science is hot in the AI world. But what will AI eliminate as jobs, and how do we take all these cloud native technologies and make sure that the next generation is ready for them? And that, of course, is our setup into the conversation we want to have with you. Is you're on the academia side, you've actually been working with the CNCF, and they announced this new accrediting academic computing program with the Linux Foundation. So I was super excited to hear about it. You gave me a little preview when I bumped into you. It was in the day 2 keynote. So Langdon, can you start with, hey, what was the need? How did this come about? And yeah, explain it to our audience.
Yeah, so kind of being in academia, talk about being on the front lines of all those concerns about like, what is AI doing to tech jobs, and like, how do I get involved in that kind of stuff? And how do I make sure I can graduate and go get a job, right? Or should I go get a master's degree? All that stuff. Very much part of my everyday life. But kind of going to that particular program, one of the things that is a constant complaint, which it's kind of legit and it's kind of not at the same time, is that academia is this like ivory tower, and it's not always connected to what is happening in the industry. And in some ways that's kind of a good thing, in that it gives there's the latitude for exploration around things that don't matter to business, right? Which is kind of a really good thing, right? We need places where you can just kind of explore, and you don't have to have a reason for it, in a sense, right? But the trade-off to that a lot of the time is when students are coming to their undergraduate degree or even a master's degree, are they aligned with what they're buying from the university? Are they buying a kind of a general liberal arts education, or are they also kind of, or at least partially, right, trying to buy a way to enter the workforce, right? And so this is obviously a balance that we struggle with all the time, right? Both students, academics, college presidents. I mean, everybody, right? We all struggle with this. So the thing is that what can happen is that what's going on in the industry is not always what's going on in academia or what's being taught. And so specifically in this case, for these two relatively small programs, we thought that it would be nice to be able to have a way for the industry to say, hey, we think cybersecurity is really, really important, and we think that cloud native development is really, really important. And in order to communicate that, like, what do those things mean? The idea is like, hey, let's put together a list of things that somebody who is going to do, and I'm much more familiar with cloud native development. Anybody who knows me knows I'm, much more on the developer side of the house, not so much on the cybersecurity side of the house. But so I was mostly focused on that one. But what does it mean to say cloud native development? And so what we did was we put together a list of topic areas that we think are really important for students to understand in order to understand how to do cloud native development, because cloud native development is not the same as traditional programming, right? It's not the same as even a website of 10 years ago or whatever. There's a fundamental difference about how you approach the architecture, things about how do you deal with like kind of the elasticity of those environments and keeping track of what's going on in them and all this other stuff, right? And if you do Kubernetes every day, right, you're very familiar with a lot of these problems. However, most of the time when you're taking a computer science degree or even data science degree in college, the problems are smaller and simpler, right? When we put together a lecture or whatever, we kind of have to, by nature, make the problem simpler to teach the students how to kind of get through it. So what we try to do is put together a list of topics that says, these are the things that a student should understand in order to understand how to do cloud native development. And so what we then do is, what an accreditation means is that a university or a school can say, hey, we believe we teach these things. And so here is the topic area. Here is the class and lecture that teaches that topic area. And then somebody from the Linux Foundation comes back and reviews that and says, yes, we agree. Or, hey, maybe this thing isn't actually covered as well, and maybe you could work on that a little bit and bulk up that lecture or series of lectures, so that an industry professional could look at that accreditation and say, okay, I have student A who took these 5 classes, so I can be pretty confident that if I go hire this person, they're going to actually understand cloud native development. They may have very little practice of it, but it'll give them a lot more reassurance that the training they're going to have to do as soon as they start the job, right, is going to be more about mechanics rather than understanding the concepts, right? And so that's really what it's trying to do. Say, hey, this student who's taken these classes should have a pretty good understanding of it. But it kind of also works on the flip side, is it also kind of tells academia, hey, this is what we mean when cloud native development, when we say cloud native development, it's these topic areas, if you follow me. So that's also difficult because, obviously most academics are not building, massively scalable enterprise applications in Kubernetes every day. And so kind of keeping track of, okay, well, what all do they need to know? Even with the best intention is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So that was a very long answer.
No, it was great, fascinating stuff. When it comes to the Linux Foundation and the CNCF, one of the great things about it is it's not just a bunch of vendors. There are end users also involved. Any visibility into, how do the vendors and the end users that are part of the foundation participate in any way? Because, I could think from the vendor standpoint, there would be things that make sure that they're matching with the technologies, and maybe they can even have things where they donate. I remember back when I was in school, it was like everybody learned to use apples because Apple donated lots of things to primary education, and that had a whole generation that used Apple. And on the enterprise side, one of the biggest things we hear is, hey, I need to find more people that understand these technologies. And so therefore you would think there might be some kind of pairing along the way, or maybe that's
100%. Yeah. I will say on this thing though, it's kind of funny. So we took very much the open source route of putting this out there, where we kind of put together what we think is a pretty reasonable guess about what it is. And yes, we got a bunch of people involved, but we're kind of waiting for bug reports, right? Like we would really invite people to come along and say, hey, well, what about this topic area? You don't really cover, I don't know, data workflows well or something. What maybe we should add some bullets around that, or give a little bit more meat to that. And the expectation is that it's going to evolve over time with that kind of feedback. But another thing I would say kind of on the other side of that is we also want to encourage, because what I would really like to also be able to do is say, hey, you're not really teaching, how virtual machines work really at all in your classes. But here's a bunch of like sample lectures and assignments and homework and things like that you can adopt, right? Or adapt or do whatever you want with as a way to build that feature into your kind of academic program. And so more contribution of that kind of content. We even have a working group within the CNCF called the Higher Ed Working Group that is trying to actively take and encourage those contributions so that we can kind of collect that stuff and say, here's this stuff. Now, I will say I would say this is true for most instructors in general, but academics as well in particular, will rarely adopt an entire curriculum or something from a third party. Instead, what they do is they might take bits and pieces. It's actually very much the forking manner, right? Where you're going to kind of take the pieces and then adapt it to be your own, right? So what we want to do is kind of say, hey, here's some stuff, right? And one of the challenges we struggle with, and this goes back to the vendors, is that a lot of the vendors really want the content that they produce to be really specific about their product, right? And that's usually anathema to most academics in that we want the concept, right? I want to talk about Tecton. I don't want to talk about an individual implementation of it, right? Or I want to talk about, in a sense, I don't even really want to talk about Tecton. I want to talk about how do I do workflow engines and why are they important and what do they do? I don't know why I'm harping on workflow today, but but containerization, or how do I do communication between those different things, or event-driven architectures, why are they important, especially in a cloud native scenario, rather than individual implementations. And this can often be a struggle between how vendors can kind of participate in this academic side, because I'm trying to teach them about the concept, the ideas, right? And sometimes I'll use a tool as an example, but it really is just an example because I want them to understand event-driven architecture, not some individual company's implementation of that. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I mean, you were part of, we had the Cube by Example program that we did, and the education on that tried to be, step one is understand the concepts, understand all the open source. And then if you want to dig into the specific products, there was links to it, but the nice thing about being Red Hat, we can lead with project and open source,
Right.
and we do that at KubeCon and everything like that. And a lot of vendors can't do that. Tell me, what are you looking for? This has been launched now. I'm assuming Boston University is now part of this. Other universities, what's the call to action, I guess, that you're looking for?
Yeah, so the big thing is, we really want, kind of universities to come and basically apply. And so, on the webpage, there's, a little button where you say, I would like to apply for this. And, and basically what you do is you take, it's actually, there's a number of other accreditations. This isn't meant to replace any of those. There's obviously, you are a university accreditation, which is kind of like the highest level, but also organizations like the NSA and things like that have accreditations that most academia is pretty familiar with. So this is really just another one, right? In the sense that there should be an operational exercise where you kind of say, okay, I downloaded the list of things I need to cover. I went and dug around and what classes and those things teach that. And then I have some sort of sign off from my group lead, a dean or a chair or something like that says, yes, I agree. We are in on this. But yeah, so basically go and apply and fill in that content. And that would be excellent. I think especially early on, right? Feel free to send us a note and we will do our best to help you try to figure that out. Obviously, we don't know every school's classes, but we're really excited to engage more people, because what we really want to do in our magic mystical world, right, is we would like the next keynote, right, the one in Atlanta, to be representatives from a bunch of different universities or colleges or whatever, that we all stand on stage and we are all like, yes, we're a part, that kind of thing. So the more of them we can get, and we really want a range. We want community colleges, we want liberal arts schools, we want R1 universities like Boston University. One of my colleagues on the team is a NYU person. He's on the cybersecurity side. So we want NYU, we want all these different flavors of schools to be participants as well, so that we can kind of give the best, the kind of most uniform outcomes we can, and we can kind of all say, hey, it's available to everybody. We really want people to participate. And obviously we are, as they say in open source, right, always taking PRs, always taking feedback. Please feel free to let us know if you think anything's really janky or dumb.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me to see the overlap between, the open source activity and the technology piece. BU is one of our lighthouse accounts for some of the AI activity that we're doing here at Red Hat with OpenShift AI. It's spin up the data science class, do all the things you've done. When you're done, you can turn it off. NYU is another one that I had some interaction with. They spoke at OpenShift Commons. I believe it was just in Salt Lake City. It's like you look at some of the big banks, you look at some of the universities, you've got the people that have their day jobs, you've got the IT, you've got open source, and sometimes those commingle. Langdon, let's talk a little bit about your classes. You've got a long history doing live stream. Here we are on YouTube and Twitch. How does that play into what you're doing with your lectures?
So I have a theory, right, is that, partially it's because I have kids, partially because, I don't know, maybe I'm too young myself, but that during the pandemic, a lot of classes went to kind of Zoom kind of model with essentially a stream of text on the side of your lecture, right? As well as you see Twitch streaming, right, which has a side of, chat, etc. Now you're seeing, you see it on kind of a lot of different venues like TikTok and YouTube and that kind of thing, where you'll actually see, okay, here's the main content, right? And then Subway Surfer is being played on the side. So I have a theory that a certain amount of distraction for the modern student, so somebody who's, just kind of, well younger than you or I, right, a certain amount of distraction actually will help them pay better attention in something like a lecture. So I took my crazy idea and I went to an internal funding agency within BU and I said, here's my crazy idea. Could you support me trying to do some research on this? And they said yes. And I was like, okay, cool. So what we've been doing is we've been putting together a little tool that would try to run a live anonymous chat stream on the side of a lecture in a big, lecture hall. Now, the obvious one there is that, we have a lot of international students. We have a lot of people who get, nervous about speaking, and especially in a 100-student lecture hall. And so what we do is, so the common example is like, this is just an opportunity to kind of raise your hand without having to kind of raise your hand, right? Yep. But what I really think is that if we can get a kind of a chat going, kind of that's going on at the same time, it'll actually make the lecture more engaging for students who kind of, were in high school and elementary school during the pandemic. And so that's what I'm experimenting with. We've got most of the tool put together, and we're going to try it out in the fall. And I think that'll be really interesting. So we'll have, an anonymous Twitch stream in the lecture, except it's not anonymous to me. So as a result, I can count it for participation, and I can make sure people aren't, saying questionable things. But it's a way that, they're anonymous to the other students. And so just as kind of an experiment to see how that goes. And so I think that's going to be entertaining.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got one of my children in college, and definitely could see how a little bit of distraction could help there, and love to see the experimentation with some of those things. It's lots of changes going on in that space. Give us a little bit.
Go back to, yeah. I was going to say, do you want to go back to AI a little bit? In my other class, one of the things we're doing in that is, if you recall, so I built this class around, Google during the pandemic built this basically massive engine that did proximity notification of COVID, right? So basically you and I, let's say we don't know each other, right? But we walk by each other in a hallway and we get Bluetooth pings. And so, but then, I test positive. So then this Google backend, right, would notify you that you were in close proximity to somebody who tested positive. And so in that class, what I do is I say, okay, what if you were working at Google and, somebody up high came along and said, hey, go build this. How would you do that? Because there's no website, right? It's a true data engineering project. You got to move lots of data around. You got to do lots and lots of different stuff. Now, what I do, though, in that class to kind of really engage with this LLM world is the class is so much work that there's no way you could do it yourself. So instead, the expectation is you are using one of these generative AI tools, and I make some recommendations, and I teach some, prompt engineering and how to recognize when it's producing good stuff or whatever, so that all the work you're submitting, you're basically leveraging those tools in order to actually produce a better result. Because one of the huge problems, we were talking about this a little bit before, one of the huge problems is that as somebody who's been in this industry for a really long time, I can look at the output of ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and I can tell what's garbage and what's not, right? And I can, and then I can refine it, or I can also, which surprises me that I do, but there will be some things that it's stupid and wrong about, but I won't tell it to fix it because it's so much easier for me to just fix it once it's done, rather than trying to explain to it what's wrong with it. So, so these are things that I can do because I have this expertise. But if you have somebody who's, very fresh to the field, how do we teach them how to recognize good quality result and how to make it better? And so what I'm hoping in this class, and I've taught it twice now, actually, and I'm going to rejigger it a bit this summer. But, what I'm hoping is that this will start to be down the educational path of, in the real world, in industry or whatever, you're going to start using these tools to produce your actual results. How do you make sure it's as good quality as it would be if, a reasonably good human had written the same thing? So that's a very interesting class as well.
Yeah, I love that. Reminds me, Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows, said, we're really worried about some of the basic understanding of things. We've shifted to the search engines, and Google's the world. Very much ties in like the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's, how many people just don't understand a good argument and don't understand a topic, and therefore can be misled by wrong or bad information. And if my default learning a technology is to get it from, some chatbot or some AI, I don't, how do I determine whether that's good or not? It
Mhm.
was, my kids' generation were like, oh, don't trust Wikipedia. But it was like at the same time, help make Wikipedia better,
Right, right.
a type of thing. And I mean, I've contributed to Wikipedia quite a few times, but it's a challenging thing as to understanding, because the conversation we said talking about like jobs and AI and everything is, if you don't have any junior devs, you're going to run out of senior devs eventually.
Mhm.
So,
Exactly, exactly.
interesting stuff. Yeah, I guess last question I have for you. You had a note in our prep about enabling journalists with tech. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we teach a class the Spark program, which you kind of loosely mentioned at the beginning. Part of how I got involved with BU in the first place when I was still at Red Hat is that there's a program at BU called the Spark program, and it's an experiential learning program, and that is academia speak for having a class that does projects for third parties. So they're real world projects with caveats that they're usually pretty small and straightforward in the grand scheme of things, but they're not manufactured projects, right? They're things that are actually in the real world. They have to run in the real world, and many students are interested in at least one class that is about kind of experiencing a real world project. And so Spark runs a whole bunch of classes. One that does projects in data science, one that does machine learning, one that does software engineering, another one in UX and UI, and then one where actually the students bring projects. So they're like, their little entrepreneurial idea or whatever. And so that's one of the classes. But then one of the ones that I've taught for the last 2 semesters, so basically I'm usually the one who teaches the one that we don't find, because normally we try to do is get industry instructors to teach these classes as well. But so I often fill in the gaps when we don't have an industry instructor. But when I was in high school, I thought very seriously about going after journalism. I thought it was really interesting, and then for reasons that just wasn't the path I took. So I have a very strong interest in it. But so we teach this one class, which is co-instructed between a data science person or computer science person and a journalist. So a journalist from our comms school, and the real world projects are for editors at like the Boston Globe or NBC or whatever, and it's go find a story in this data. Right. And, usually they have an idea about the kind of thing they're looking for. And then, we kind of go and marshal a bunch of data, and then we try to give this, we give the student team an opportunity to go figure it out. Right. And usually the teams are 2 to 4 tech adjacent students, I jokingly refer to it as, coming from engineering and stats and computer science and data science. And then 1 journalist is also on the team. So a journalism student. And they put together stories. And so because I've been kind of really deeply involved in this, and one of the things that I've been trying to figure out, I kind of put together a methodology that's kind of an agile method, but it's not Scrum, because the Scrum doesn't really work well. It's kind of, for these projects, because it's just not aligned right. So I kind of developed a new methodology that's loosely Kanban with some other stuff mixed in, including the fact-checking process of journalism, et cetera. So I've been getting very involved in data-driven journalism. And there's a conference about it called NICAR that I went to this year. It was, I don't know, a couple months ago. And what's super interesting is that you have some very deeply technical journalists who are developing tools, right? But they only use them once, right? But they are happy to make them open source. They're excited for other people to use them. They've written them in such a way that they are kind of consumable by others. But the vast majority of journalists are not as deep tech as these, kind of unusual, people. So what I've been trying to figure out is there a way that we could actually have almost kind of a blend of this experiential learning, where could we put together a center, or something that is a bunch of students who are providing support and maintenance on these projects, and kind of build it like the CNCF, where, journalist does this brilliant piece of work and then essentially donates that code to this center, and then they kind of take it over. It's still open source. You can still take contributions to the upstream. There's still community, all that other stuff that CNCF encourages, except we have the added benefit of we employ a bunch of students to actually provide kind of mainline maintenance, and then kind of, some level of support to journalists who are less techy, but still want to try to do this data-driven journalism. And this seems to be a very good topic right now as well from a social justice.
Yeah, Langdon, I've got some thoughts. I got a connection or two I want to make sure you know, because I mean, I lived in the media world for a decade, and even in the Boston area, there's some awesome people. I'm sure we have some overlap, but yeah, let's follow up after this. A lot to cover. I think it's time for us to switch over to our rapid fire questions from Red Hat.
Sure.
All right. First one, Langdon, has been my top question really the last year. How are you using AI in your daily life?
Oh, constantly. I use it all the time. I have, and I strongly encourage, even there's a new feature in Firefox now that you can actually hook up your LLM directly in the browser. But basically I use it for, hey, I actually just used it this past weekend because I needed to make, for Easter, we had, salmon, we had swordfish, we had lamb. I needed to time it all out, right? And so I actually asked ChatGPT to put together like a schedule for the recipes, as well as kind of everything else. But I mean, I use it, 16 times a day to do nearly everything. And I strongly encourage it. It's the only way to truly integrate it into your life and really understand how it works, is just have it plugged into everything that you're doing, and see the outcome, and get better and better with it.
Okay, is it being good at remembering that you're doing gluten-free?
Yes, actually, it's funny because I have other food allergies in my household, and so I actually have to fight with it a little bit, because sometimes I don't want dairy-free, which one of my kids has an allergy to dairy. So I've actually instructed it to try to remember that I always want things to be gluten-free, but I only want you to do dairy-free if I request it, and things like that. So yeah, there's actually that kind of interesting battle where it kind of over memorizes things. And so, yeah, it's really interesting. But, recipes, I just think is the most innocuous one to talk about, but I use it for tech. I use it for coding. I use it for, generating, ideas or fleshing out ideas. So I use it all the time.
Awesome. All right. Second question from you. Wonder if you could talk a little bit about the transition from vendor world to academic life, and how that went.
Super weird. So I knew it was going to be different, right? Like, of course, right? And the just to answer the comment in the chat real quick, I'm not trusting the AI. It's not making the food for me, right? It's just giving me a recipe, and then I adapt it, or I, criticize it or whatever. But yeah, I've been a food allergy parent for, whatever, 20 years ish, right? I have a lot of experience with it. So I can tell when it's saying, oh, you should use this. And I say, no, that seems stupid and dangerous, so I'm not going to do that. So just to answer the chat question. Yeah. Sorry. So the move to academia has been really interesting because, like I said, I expected it to be different, but just so many things are different, like just how you're rated, and things about like what is important, and things like that are all quite different. Markers of success. One of the things, even if you go read like the faculty handbook at BU, your promotion level is based on how well you're known worldwide, right? And you have to have letters of recommendation for promotion from people you don't know to get the highest levels, which is kind of crazy, right? But the other fun part is, but not in the places that I've spent most of my career, right? Which is like the open source Linux world. I've spent a lot of time in that space. but that's not an academic space where, you know, there's a lot of researchers and things like that going on. And so that's also been really challenging, is like, how do I translate, you know, the communities that I am very involved in and the things that I do, you know, with two things that academics will recognize, right? The people who are promoting those kinds of things. And then the other one is the one we were kind of talking about before. It's like, how do you balance industry needs, right, versus educational needs? How, like, where is that line? And it shifts all the time in the education, right? Like, what, you know, I need these students to, like I said, you know, my example from before is I need them to understand event-driven architecture, but I also need them to understand how to keep track of what are the hottest players in that space and how to make choices about what vendors to choose, right? And those balances are really hard. I don't know. Does that answer that question? It's
It
very
was great.
long.
It's definitely a very different world. But
Mhm.
all right, I got an easy one for you. For the last one, give us your favorite Red Hat memory.
Oh, I really liked, you know, I really liked doing DevNation. That was a conference we kicked off. I really, actually, I'll pitch DevConf US. I really like kicking off DevConf US. CFP is still open, so go check out devconf.us and throw the URL in the chat. That is an on-campus FBU open source conference, highly encouraging to new speakers, as well as new conference attendees. We actually do conference attendee mentoring, so you know how to go to a conference, which I think is an unusual thing, so that's been really cool. I would also, you know, I think the classic, of course, is like, it's all the people, right? Like, you know, there's so many people I've met and so many people who really knew their stuff, but I think one of my favorites was the Sticker Depot. Is that, you know, when I first joined Red Hat, I joined as what we call now a developer advocate, right? And so part of my job was a developer advocate for RHEL, right? So, oh yeah, everything, you know, all of Linux, and I was the only one, right? So when I dropped into Red Hat, I was like, okay, my major goal is to meet all of the engineers, so I know how we can balance, or so I know where to go when I get a question about, you know, how does Apache HTTPD work, right? I need to know who to go talk to. So in order to try to encourage this, and based on the Westford office, which had these huge long desks, I created the Sticker Depot, which was basically all the stickers I was collecting from conferences, and I laid them all out, and then, because I was kind of on the way from the parking lot, people would stop, see the stickers, and I would get a chance to meet them, right? And I learned two really interesting sociological things there. One was that culturally, there's so many things that you need to remember that other cultures don't have. So, for example, I'm very used to take a penny, leave a penny at your convenience store in the US. And there is no expectation that if I take a penny that I will leave a penny. It is if you need one, take one. If you have extras, leave them. Less true these days with credit cards, that kind of thing. But I had a little sign that said, take a sticker, leave a sticker, with the implied thing of, you know, if you want a sticker, feel free. Or if you have some, drop some off. But people were interpreting it as you had to leave stickers in order to take stickers. Yeah. So I made a very complicated flowchart where all arrows pointed to everything, and put that next to the take a sticker, leave a sticker. And it was just a great reminder that my culture is not your culture, and that you need to remember that. And, you know, and I use that example a lot with my students about, why do you need lots of perspectives on a team? Because you need to understand the different cultures, where people are coming from, so that you get good products, right? And so, yeah, so it's a great example. But then the other thing was also the sociological experiment of, when the stickers were all messed up on my desk, how many people would come by and fix them. Their interpretation of fix, right? And then, of course, 2 hours later, I would mess it up again, just to, because I was.
Oh, that's cruel. That is cruel.
Yeah, exactly. But the best part, the part that I really remember, right, is that they started taking off worldwide. So there were, it's been a few years since I was at Red Hat, but there were sticker depots in a bunch of the offices around the world. And at least in theory, I claim credit for having started them. But they could have done it independently. I have no idea. But
yeah, I remember seeing it in the Westford office before they shut down. Langdon, if you're up for it, we did get one in the chat. See if you want to dive in. It's asking about AI usage, energy consumption.
Yes.
So something,
this is a super hard one. There was actually just an article like this week or something about how, a lot of people will respond to ChatGPT or whatever with, thank you for your answer, or please do this. And the amount of kind of negative climate impact that has just being polite to ChatGPT, that is a huge problem. And it's and I think this is something that we really need to be working on. I think kind of kind of related, right? But as more and more content is being produced by these tools, how do we continue to improve them without basically self-referential destruction? But the energy part is, and really it's not so much, I don't care so much about the energy consumption. I care about the climate impact of the energy consumption, right? And so I would say the climate impact and how do we deal with that? This is a huge problem. I do not have answers. I'm not sure that it's a, what do they call it? It's a genie we can put back in the bottle. So we need to find a way to solve those problems, much like we do with other climate challenges, right? Like, it's just, but I don't have a good answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at Red Hat, we're always working at trying to measure and help, streamline things, smaller models that can do that. But, we work closely with our partners, like from a cloud provider standpoint. The cloud provider that comes up with an energy efficient solution is going to do phenomenally well. So
I did have actually one more thought, though. I just remembered from when I was doing the Insider Show, I actually interviewed some people from I always get their terminology wrong in CNCF, but I think it was a working group. But there is a group within CNCF that is actively working on basically identifying the impact of Kubernetes on stuff, right? Like, and so, you got to do monitoring to understand like energy consumption, but also, can you do modeling about the CPU usage and, and then maybe make different choices. So like, can one of the information pieces about where you're going to land a container inside your Kubernetes infrastructure, could it be that it's going to favor greener VMs first, for example? And so they're doing a bunch of work in that space.
Yep, it's the Energy Sustainability Working Group, and
there you go.
The Kepler project, which Red Hat's one of the main contributors to, is part of that. Awesome.
So I interviewed those folks. If you go back and watch my show.
Awesome. Well, Langdon, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Definitely call out to the community. Make sure you check out the academic accreditation that's there. Hopefully, we'll get more people to sign up and give feedback on it. Always open source. Give back feedback on it. So, Langdon, thank you. Pleasure. It was great running into you in London.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us. And
thanks for having me.
With, looking to have a Red Hat Summit preview very soon. Might actually be next week. So keep an eye out on the YouTube and Twitch channel for that. And as always, thank you for joining us on your journey in the clouds.